The story opens with a person's inner monologue about a place known as the Federation Kingdom of the East, a peaceful and prosperous land on the surface filled with laughter and abundance. But soon all this peace and harmony was destined to be shattered by 5 terrifying entities who would descend on this world in 10 years' time and bring ruin to the entire kingdom and all its people. And these entities would call themselves the 5 Great Sins, and the power possessed by each sin would be incomprehensible to anything known to mankind, and no one would be able to stand in their way as they would carve their way across the world, with even literal armies of soldiers being nothing more than paper in their path. And in order to prevent this catastrophe, a man made a desperate decision to stop these 5 sins from manifesting into this world. And the way he chose to do it was to adopt all of these sins as his own children before they could fully awaken to use their power to destroy him along with the whole world. But the problem was, at first it sounded like it would be a piece of cake, but now after getting a taste of their power, he wasn't too sure about it, because controlling such terrifying entities for a mortal with no special powers or talents was proving to be a losing battle. But before we get into how things got to this point, let's rewind a couple of years back to the time when he first arrived into this world and possessed the body of a bastard son of a noble family. Before this, he used to be a corporate slave working 78 hours a week just to get by, and now he was somehow sitting inside a massive mansion trying to figure out the new language of this world. So yeah, it wasn't all that bad of a deal. At first, things were going pretty smoothly. He had servants pampering him, attending to his every need, maids standing by all around him 24/7 to make sure he lacked nothing, even giving him baths, which to be fair wasn't as great as he had thought at the beginning, because he couldn't even get a moment of privacy in the toilet. But hey, still better than being worked to death by a psycho boss of a company that didn't care if he lived or died, and lived the rest of his life as a burned-out nobody. That was when, in the middle of his thoughts, he heard one of the maids informing him about some young master who was said to return tomorrow, so she suggested he get to bed early tonight so he was prepared to greet the man properly when he arrives. But since the kid had no clue who she was talking about, he asked the woman, and that surprised her a little, since the fool was acting like he didn't even know his own family. But not like she could call him a moron to his face, since that meant losing her head. So she told the kid about a person by the name of Palacio, and that one word shattered all his dreams and fantasies of living a carefree life as a pampered, useless, good-for-nothing noble son. And to the women's shock, the kid began panicking, and that scared the soul out of him. The boy, on the other hand, was fully ready to drown himself right here and now, because he finally realized what this place was, and what kind of world he got thrown into. From the world he came from, this place is nothing but a video game by the name of Psychedelia, which was a turn-based RPG he used to waste his free time on. And the reason he was so terrified of this place was because in the near future, the 5 great sins were destined to descend on this land. And when that happened, no matter which route he took, his fate of turning into a cold body lying on the ground wouldn't change. As for his family, the Palacio household, these guys were one of the great noble houses which were to be wiped out by those sins and completely erased from existence, and rightfully so, because these guys aren't what they seem on the surface. According to the story, this house had 3 sons, including him, but unlike him who was completely useless and spends his days doing absolutely nothing, the other 2 sons were basically monsters in human form. The eldest, named Leo Palacio, nicknamed the King of Prostitutes, and the second son, Tonio Palacio, the King of Drugs. And looking at the massive mansion with his own eyes, those horrific memories started coming back to him as he recalled the last time he was here, and how back then this character was brutally taken out by the hands of those sins right alongside the whole Palacio family. And cherry on top, this family was the first one to go down at those monsters' hands. After a while, he was back in his room, already given up and wishing to be sent back to his boring but peaceful life of a 78-hour-a-week wage salary man, where at least the only thing trying to kill him was his boss and not actual demons. But since he never heard any voice from the other side to give him broken powers or saw a fancy system window popping in front of him, tears began rolling down his face as he cursed his luck of being trapped inside the body of a useless guy with no special powers or connections. But then, in the middle of all that, a thought hit him, and he sat up straight on the bed because apparently he was the only person in this world who knew the future and how this story would unfold, meaning he could use that knowledge to his advantage. And the first thought that came to his mind was to remove the cause of this world's downfall before it had the chance to take root. And no, he wasn't thinking of pulling something like Sarah Connor from the Terminator, going back to stop the threat before it's even born. He was just planning on adopting all those sins while they were still children to reform them. Even though that seemed like a solid plan, he still wasn't sure. After all, at the end of the day, he was nothing more than an illiterate, useless son of a family who already wants him gone, and dealing with 5 of the most dangerous beings with the power to end the world was way above his pay grade. The story cuts 2 months ahead, and turns out in the end, he decided to go through with that plan. And after searching the whole kingdom for those sins, he managed to find the first one, and it was all thanks to this man by the name of Evan, his personal knight, who had been gathering information this whole time, and was reporting to the kid that the girl named Utia was rescued and sent to their orphanage. The kid praised the man for an excellent job, but the man for some reason asked if that was supposed to be a compliment, since his facial expression said otherwise. Not sure what he was thinking here, but since the guy wouldn't stop complaining about his facial expressions, he forced a weird smile to thank the man, which ended up making the situation even more awkward. Apparently, in his original body, he used to be really good at controlling his facial expressions, a skill he perfected over the years to suck up to his bosses. But now in this new body, he was having a really hard time doing the same thing. Well, enough of his stupidity. Back with this eye patch man, he is a rare character from the game, who stays honest and loyal to his master even amidst all the betrayals that were bound to happen following the destruction brought by the sins, which was why he was the first guy our hero hired as his right-hand man. Although this was none of his concern, the man was still curious about the child they rescued from that illegal slave trading ring, and when asked what he was talking about, the man informed the kid that when he first laid his eyes upon that child, he instantly realized that girl was no ordinary kid, because despite her being chained up and starved half to death like the other kids in that smelly cell, the aura that girl was giving off at that moment was unlike anything he had felt in his entire life. And because of that, he was curious about something and asked the reason for not bringing that girl to live with him instead, since he was sure keeping a child with potential like that close to him would benefit him a lot in the future. Although our hero agreed he was right to think that, he couldn't do that at the moment since this was also part of his plan. According to the game's story, the character named Utia Blodia, the child they managed to rescue, is actually a non-human who signs a contract with an otherworldly being in exchange for its power, and because of that contract, she gained enough power to level a city, and ends up becoming the Sin of Wrath. So he was somewhat terrified of keeping someone like that under the same roof as him. Well, at least not until he was 100% sure that child wasn't a ticking time bomb. And this time, with everything he was doing, he was just hoping he could change the fate of that child and prevent her from becoming Wrath by making sure her every need was met. But still, he needed to satisfy the man's question, so he quickly came up with an excuse, and forcing the most serious face he could muster, he told the man it was not the right time yet. Yeah, that definitely raised more questions in the man's head than it answered. Fearing being hit by another question, our boy quickly changed topics and instructed the man to make sure that kid was well taken care of and provide her with an allowance for anything she might need. And just before sending him off, he brought out a letter meant for Utia and instructed the man to make sure it reached her, since it was meant to reassure the girl that she was safe and no longer alone, and he would be taking care of her every need. Cut a couple of minutes, and the man was seen riding his way out of the mansion, with our hero watching the man leave, while hoping that letter would be enough to win over that child's trust. Turns out that letter wasn't just for reassurance. It contained some quotes he heard inside the game to calm a demon like Utia, which were words from a prayer once used by a powerful bishop in the endgame, when Utia was on the verge of destroying everything. But back then, those words completely failed because the girl was already too far gone, and the bishop himself was taken out in the process, which was the story setting that led to a large-scale battle in order to stop the Sin of Wrath. But right now, since she is still a child, our boy hoped that those words would be enough to calm her down, and since the first sin was taken care of, he got ready to begin his search for the next sin. Cut to the girl who was reading through the letter, and right in front of her was Evan, and the man was getting more and more uneasy by the minute, watching that girl's expressions change as she read through that letter. Plus, the mana he was sensing being released from her body was unbelievable, which wasn't helping his situation either. Just then, as he was trying to figure out what this child was, he got startled hearing the girl's voice as she asked about the man who sent this letter her way and why that man left her inside of this orphanage instead of letting her serve by his side. Just that glare from the child was enough for Evan to soil his pants, and he wasn't sure what he was supposed to think, since this child was manifesting mana around them just through her emotions, which was something only a person at the Master Realm was capable of doing. While coming up with an excuse, he suddenly recalled the kid's words about what he told him at that time, so mustering up his courage, he forced some words out of his mouth, telling the girl it wasn't the right time to take her to that place. Surprisingly, that answer calmed the child down a little, and it was all thanks to the quotes written in that letter. And strangely, the child began murmuring something about some promise that only her master would know. But Evan, on the other hand, was so overwhelmed by everything that his hand instinctively reached for his blade after hearing the child's words, as the man was risking his life in front of this literal demon in human form. The one responsible for sending him there was peacefully lying in his bed, thinking to himself how he managed to extend his luxurious lifespan all thanks to Evan. And with the first sin secured, he was already planning on moving on to finding the next child and do his best in making sure he doesn't turn out to be his executioner, who ends him when everything falls apart. Cut to the next morning, and the kid was seen being rained down upon by books in some part of the mansion. Following the sound, Evan came running in to check up on the kid, but our boy told the man to forget about this and asked about his meeting with that girl and if she was settling down into her new life. Just as Evan was about to answer, the door to the place was suddenly blown off its hinges, and when they turned around, they found a man calling Alan his brother. This right here, with that smug-looking face, is the second son of the county, Tonio Palatio, aka the King of Drugs, and also one of the people who constantly made the original owner of this body's life miserable, and right now, he was curious to know what his illiterate little brother was doing inside a library, But since the kid wasn't responding to his provocation, the guy began getting angry, which in turn started to make our hero angry, and he was this close to punching the guy's lights out. But that would mean attracting unnecessary attention towards himself, something he didn't need at the moment. So instead, he leaped back and bowed in front of the guy to apologize for ruining his day with his ugly face. Yeah, that was more like it, and just as the guy was about to open his mouth to say something to further mock our hero, a projectile was seen shooting past his face, and the thing landed on a nearby wall. Surprised, both brothers turned to see what it was, and found a dagger jabbed into that thing. As for the one responsible, he was standing by the doorway, telling both fools to leave this place immediately, since they were making his eyes hurt. As for the man's identity, this one is the first son named Leo Palactio, the king of prostitutes. And turns out neither of the two liked each other's guts, and since our hero didn't want to get dragged into whatever was about to come, he slowly began crawling his way out of the place while the two idiots were busy with each other. As for why these two were constantly fighting, it was all because of the position of the family head, which both brothers were desperately trying to claim for themselves. But unlike them, the only thing our hero cared for was a sweet, peaceful life, so he didn't even bother looking back as the two fools began duking it out right in the middle of the house. After crawling for a bit, he finally made it to his room and was completely exhausted after witnessing that whole drama. Turning toward Evan, he noticed the guy staring at him for some reason, but since he was too lazy to ask what his problem was, he just turned around and got ready to get some sleep. As for Evan, the man was trying to understand how someone as weak and useless as this kid knew about that illegal slave market where that child was being held. Plus, just recently, following our hero's instructions, they also busted some secret bio-experiments happening in a different region from where they managed to save another child. But the information he provided was far too precise to be just a coincidence, since both these organizations operated in such secrecy that not even their intelligence guild, the largest information-gathering organization on the continent, knew anything about them. But ignoring that for now, he decided to report to the kid that the child he was looking for was rescued and transferred to the same orphanage as Utia, and just like the girl, that child didn't seem normal either. Yeah, our hero knew that all too well because that kid was a walking disaster on a cataclysmic scale. As for who that child is and where he came from, he was being held in a place called Kallian Kingdom, and this one is supposed to be the second boss of the game named Deus Macallian. And unlike that girl, this child's story is far more tragic, because after being sold into slavery, he was abused by countless people as he got passed from place to place, eventually landing in the hands of some psychos who turned him into their experiment subject. And because of all that abuse and suffering buried inside him, the child in the game attracted the attention of something terrifying, and due to the power he received from that entity, he became the embodiment of one of the 5 deadly sins, known as the Sin of Sloth. And the first thing he did after acquiring this power was annihilate the kingdoms responsible for his misery in the most horrific way imaginable, and this was also the part of the story where many players were left disturbed by the game's cruelty. And to make it worse, despite his title as the Sin of Sloth, the kid wasn't as lazy as one would expect. He used to be an extremely hard-working, cunning, and restless person who repaid his debts to all those people several times over, which was also the reason our boy needed to take extra care of this child to make sure he doesn't snap this time and come after his head. As all that was going through his head, he heard Evan asking about the letter he sent to Utia this time, and if it contained anything about the second child that was sent to that place. Our hero answered yes, and since he wanted to befriend the girl, he also added some small talk in it, mostly about how his second brother had been making his life miserable lately. Cut to the orphanage, and a lone kid was seen standing in the distance far away from the other children of the orphanage, and all that silence and isolation he carried inside his heart seemed to attract something to his location. As he heard a voice quietly noting that he looked like someone who had already been broken, a fact made clear by the scars covering his entire body. Turning to the person, he heard her asking if he also saw the black goat and if it was that goat responsible for his current condition. Before the kid could answer, the girl congratulated him for being one of the chosen ones by the great moon who rescued him and sent him to this place. As soon as she said that, both of them began getting covered with some kind of energy, which, according to Utia, was the power that was being bestowed upon the kid by her lord. After which she reached out to the kid with a promise that if he stayed loyal and followed their lord's orders, he would be granted with the power to take his revenge on the people who tormented him for all these years. As soon as those words hit the kid's ears, all that power started rushing into his body, and he began losing control over his mind. After she was done turning the kid into the very fucking thing that our hero feared the most, she turned to the letter in her hand to write her first reply to the man who delivered her such a gift in the form of this child. And she knew exactly how she was going to repay her master's kindness. The story cuts to the next morning, and Evan was seen barging into the library in a panic to deliver some urgent news. Seeing him make that face, the kid asked what was wrong and why he looked like he had seen a ghost. And the answer he got from the man shook him to his bones as Evan told him that his second brother was found lifeless in some other part of the city. The story fast-forwards to the funeral where the Palladio family had gathered to pay their respect and say their final farewell to the second son of the house. Well, I know I said they were gathered to pay their respect to the man, but from the looks of it, it didn't really seem like the people gathered in the place was treating this as a funeral. And that was making our hero really irritated and uncomfortable because he knew this family was messed up. But he never expected it to be this bad because the man sitting behind him was none other than his father, who came to his son's funeral with 2 prostitutes while being under the influence of drugs. Turning his attention back to the guy, he recalled about the report their family received about the cause of the man's death, which was ruled as an accidental fall, and that didn't add up. Since according to the original story, this man was supposed to die at the hands of the first son during a dispute over the count's seat, and that wasn't supposed to happen for another couple of years. Turning to the man himself, he found him grinning, and that confirmed his suspicion. This was no mere accident. The one responsible for this man's death was either this guy himself or one of his followers. But to him, it didn't matter because his main goal was still the same: to gather all the sins and make sure they don't turn into the monsters from the game. The story cuts 1 year into the future, and by now Leo had absorbed his brother's whole drug business, and with no more rivalry or political conflict between the 2 brothers, the county had become much more peaceful. As for our hero, he himself was enjoying his peaceful life as a carefree noble while continuing his search for the rest of the sins. Plus, during this time, he had gotten a lot closer to Utia, thanks to the letters they kept sending back and forth to stay in touch. And today, the letter he received was about the 2 of them playing together, as she claimed she was getting really good at hide-and-seek, and Deus was continuing to recover slowly and was really into puppeteering these days. And there was another thing in the pile of papers he received that had him surprised, since for some reason the orphanage he was running was suddenly receiving a whole lot more sponsors and donations lately, and he had no clue why. But changing topics, Evan diverted his attention towards some documents which were said to contain the information about the 3rd child they have been looking for. And this information was sent by the Intelligence Guild, who managed to find a clue pointing to where that child might be, which was just the thing he wanted to hear right now to make his day even better. Since with this 3rd boss almost within reach, he only needed to find 2 more and his chill, peaceful life in this world was pretty much guaranteed. As he was living a peaceful, carefree life in the manor, another person was busy somewhere else in the city taking care of some other business. The scene cuts to the drug distribution site, where 2 goons were seen walking towards their headquarters to deliver the cash they managed to gather from this week's drug deals. And they seemed pretty happy, since with the new boss in charge of their operations, the organization had already grown to a few hundred members. Just then, in the middle of all that, they came across an unexpected sight, as they found many of their members lying motionless on the ground. That was when they heard screams coming from the side, so they turned around and found some of the survivors who were pressing their own weapons against their throats, and from the looks of it, it seemed like something invisible was controlling their bodies. As he was lost in thought, trying to understand the situation, he heard another scream right next to him and found his friend holding a weapon, struggling just like those men. And before his brain could process the situation, the whole place turned into a blood-soaked nightmare. In that same place, a hooded figure was seen watching the whole scene unfold from the shadows, and oh boy, it was Deus and the girl behind him, I presume Utia. And you may be wondering what these 2 kids are doing in this place, taking down the men working under the oldest son of the Palacio family. Well, the answer is simple. The letters our hero had been sending to the girl. Yeah, turns out the conversations between the 2 of them, this girl had been taking them a little too seriously, which would also mean the incident 1 year ago, when the 2nd son of the Palacio family suddenly died in an accident, was also their doing, all because our hero complained to her about being bullied by that man. As for little Deus, he still had no idea how taking down these people was going to help him get his revenge. After all, the ones responsible for what happened to him were someone else, and these guys had no hand in any of that. The psycho girl assured the kid this was just one of many steps toward that goal, since before stepping out of the shadows and going after the true masterminds behind their suffering, they first needed to create the right conditions for their master to return. With that, both of them leaped into the air while unleashing a powerful burst of mana all around the place. And no, this wasn't just for flashy effects. There was a reason behind it. Because they were making a statement by leaving behind a mark to tell those pulling the strings that Blue Moon was behind this and they were next. Cut 2 more years into the future, and inside the massive mansion, Evan was seen wandering around looking for our hero to report his latest findings. And his search eventually led him to the backyard where the kid was busy practicing some basic spells, and seeing the man's condition, the kid asked if everything was alright. Turns out everything was more than alright because he managed to locate the 5th kid and sent him to the orphanage as well, and those words hit our boy's ears like music as he tried to contain his excitement. And as a thank you, he pulled out some tasty treats for the man, which the guy didn't appreciate at first since he was being treated like a dog, but hey, can't say no to sweets, so he immediately jumped into the air to catch as many as possible. As for our hero, he was glad that he hired Evan when he did, since if it weren't for this guy, he was sure finding all those kids, even with his game knowledge, would have been next to impossible for him. And since his purpose was fulfilled, he told the man he could rest easy now and take a break. Hearing that he wouldn't have to go on wild goose chases looking for random orphan kids, the man was relieved not just because the job was exhausting, but because each one of those kids was terrifying in their own way. Our hero himself was relieved that the whole thing was finally over, but then again his expressions didn't really match his actual feelings. So Evan asked the reason for looking so serious at a time like this, But according to our hero, he wasn't being serious. He was smiling. Well, apparently, even after so much time passed in this new world, he wasn't able to control his facial muscles properly. Changing topics, he asked about his visit to the orphanage and how the rest of the kids were doing. Bringing out another letter, the man assured our boy that the kids were doing just fine. So much so that they were hardly recognizable. Since the day they were brought to that place, all of them looked like broken dolls. But now, after a bit of love and care, all of them seem like completely different people. Man, I know he's helping these kids for his own selfish reasons, but that before and after difference of the two girls melted my heart. Well, anyway, the kid was happy hearing that the kids were happy and in good health, so he prepared to check the letter sent to him by Utia. Well, what do you know? Even the girl is hardly recognizable, all thanks to the care she received because of our hero. Plus, she had a huge hand in the recovery of the other kids, since she treated all of them like family, and it didn't even take them that long to become best of friends because of her kind nature. As for Evan, the guy himself was curious to know what that girl wrote on that letter, so he moved in closer. Surprisingly, in these past few years, the two of them have also grown a lot closer. So much so that both men treated each other like brothers. And since that was the case, Evan was more direct with our hero about everything, which was why he asked the kid, when was he planning on meeting with these kids? Well, the answer was never, because he has no intentions of getting close to any of them, and the reason was that only he knew the kind of personalities those kids were hiding, and how brutal the process of them turning into sins was. So he didn't want to get tangled in that mess, plus he was still terrified of the five since he had seen with his own eyes what these kids did after receiving their powers to the people around them. But on the outside, he told the man maybe in 5 years when they were all grown up, he might go to visit them. With that out of the way, he got back to his magic training, since he still needed to perfect some skills to defend himself in case things went south. And while doing so, he heard Evan asking if he heard about an organization by the name of Blue Moon that had been pretty active lately in the city. Our hero answered no, so the man told him it was a group of unknown vigilantes who gained a lot of fame in the city recently for hunting down criminal rings. Our hero asked what the reason was for bringing something like that up in front of him. After all, they were doing them a favor by cleaning up the trash. So what was the problem in that? Evan agreed, but the thing was, small criminals weren't the only ones those guys were hunting. They were even said to have targeted many of the corrupt noble houses, and the families who ended up on their radar vanished overnight. Yeah, corrupt families targeting every single member and taking them out brutally in one night. That was the last thing he wanted to hear after already dealing with one problem, because he himself belonged to one of the most corrupt families on the continent, which was why he gave Evan a new order to sleep in the room next to his from now on. The story fast forwards to the night outside the orphanage, and inside one of the rooms, Utia was going through reports from all her subordinates and what they had been up to recently. Well, the first one to report was an adorable little wolf girl by the name of Seolrang, the sin of pride, who had just recently finished taking down an entire slave trade ring all on her own. And she was extremely happy about it since in that group were some of the people who had forcibly taken her from her family to turn her into a slave. Second up was a green-haired girl by the name of Rinti, the sin of greed, who I'm not sure what she did, but it was something about disposing of the bodies of those bastards that kidnapped children to sell them to willing buyers. Then came a confident kid who just returned from the southern region of the country after finishing his mission, and he was put in charge of dealing with a big-shot noble family named Avalon, which was pulling the strings of those bandits by providing them with financial support. As for his name, he is Radon, the sin of mysophobia. Utia was really pleased after hearing all their reports, since she was sure her master would be happy after realizing what a good job all of them had done. And since everything for the day was over, she praised all of them for a job well done and got ready to leave. But just as she was about to turn away and head out of the room, Sloth asked her to stop, since there was something important he needed to show her regarding their master. And when she asked what it was, he pulled out a letter he came across by chance during one of his regular cleanups, which was sent to a certain someone by the eldest son of the Palladio family. And the moment she heard what was written on that piece of paper, the women's expressions instantly twisted into rage, which even scared the rest of the kids in the room, since they knew whenever the girl gets like this, it means something bad is coming. As for the letter, it was an instruction to someone to slowly poison his younger brother to get rid of him after the death of their father. Yeah, no, this man dared to think about harming her master, which was a crime punishable by death, and the girl was fully ready to deal with him accordingly with her own hands. With that, the story cuts 2 years into the future, to the day the head of the Palladio family succumbed to old age and passed away. On the outside, it was officially announced to the public that he died of heart failure, but our hero knew full well the real reason was an overdose of drugs. Just then, he heard some of the guards informing his brother about an attack by Blue Moon on another noble family. And just like the other incidents, there were no survivors left to tell the tale. By then, even our hero was starting to get concerned about this Blue Moon organization. As for his father's funeral, one of the most important men in the whole county, it came to an end without a single person mourning his death. His brother, on the other hand, watching the man walking away, was getting ready to initiate his plan of getting rid of the kid as well, to get rid of any competition or obstacle to the throne. Fast forward, and our hero was seen packing some bags, which clearly surprised Evan. So he asked the kid what was going through his head all of a sudden, and if he was planning on heading out on a vacation on the very day his father was buried. Ignoring his words, the kid asked the man to do the same, since they were leaving this place. After a while, the kid was seen walking into his room to see if he was done packing his things. That was when Evan asked if he planned anything for this trip, and more importantly, where he was planning on going at such a time. Our hero assured the man he has everything thought out as for where they were going. His plan was to head to a small town by the name of Rodmail, to the south of Palacio territory, and start a new life there. As their carriage began pulling away from the mansion, another figure was seen staring at them from a distance, and that figure was none other than his brother. And from the expression on his face, it didn't seem like he was planning on giving up on his plan of taking out the kid despite him leaving the mansion. The story fast-forwarded to the next day, and the kid was seen preparing breakfast, and behind him was his new boyfriend, all giggly as he moved around some stuff to set up their new home. Turns out the two of them are settling down real nicely in their new home. Yeah, that was until the very next day when our boy found himself back in his old mansion, and the reason was his brother, who just like his father was lying motionless inside a casket, and he had no clue how and why, since this was not how this man was supposed to go. Plus his death was an assassination since someone stabbed him in his heart last night when he was inside his room. Curious to know the whole story, he turned towards one of the guards, but surprisingly, the moment his head turned at the guy, he began screaming. Not just him, even the rest of the guards were seen panicking for some reason, and he had no clue why. Seeing him making that face and the kind of commotion he was causing, Evan zoomed through the crowd to try and fix the situation. Our hero asked the man if he managed to find anything useful. Turns out he did, because to the kid's shock, the man asked if he was the one who had his eldest brother killed overnight to take over their father's position. Yeah, no, our hero immediately realized what this was all about and why all these people were acting in such a way around him. The story cuts to the time Alan was leaving his estate for Rodmill, and on their way, Evan asked the reason for choosing such a small town on the borders of their lands to live in, and suggested they head for the main city instead. But our hero straight up answered no, because Rodmill was the final destination he had decided on from the start. After all, he managed to accomplish everything he needed to in this new world. He saved the sins from misfortune and saved the world from ruin. And now with those kids living a peaceful life in the orphanage, he wants nothing to do with the main story of the game, and Rodmill is the perfect place for that, since almost nothing happens there during the whole game. But on the outside, he tries to act all wise and stuff, telling Evan everything will be revealed when the time is right. Yeah, like he was going to buy that bull, since in the past few years they had gotten close enough that Evan could see right through his bullshit from miles away. Cut to the outside, where a figure was seen observing their carriage pulling away from the mansion, and it was Leo, who at that time still wasn't sure if he should get rid of him or just let him live in peace. It didn't even take him 5 minutes to make up his decision, which was to eliminate him. After all, that was his plan from the start. Recalling the time he came asking for permission to leave the villa, he couldn't help but wonder what reason he could have had to make that decision on the very day their father perished, and whether he somehow knew of his plan, or perhaps it had something to do with their family's relations with the Avalon not being too good lately. After brainstorming for a bit, he called one of his subordinates by the name of Alman, and instructed him to follow that carriage and see where it was heading. The man, before doing anything, asked him to clarify his orders, and if he wanted him to assassinate his younger brother, and that response surprised Leo, and the reason was that this man had never talked back to him, no matter what orders he was given. So why was he asking him a question instead of quietly leaving? But he quickly brushed it off and reminded the man of his place, that he was nothing more than a servant who needed to do as his master commanded, and asking questions wasn't his place. Next panel, bam! He saw a sword being driven through his chest. Looking up, he saw it was none other than Alman himself, his most loyal subordinate, and it made zero sense. Well, it turns out this loyal subordinate was actually a spy planted in his ranks by none other than Blue Moon, and his real name is Hidden. And since he dared to even think about harming the man Blue Moon lived and died for, he got ready to finish him off, and then he pulled the blade out of the man, resulting in a spray of red liquid spilling all over the place. But somehow, even then, the guy was still alive and was asking the reason for doing this. Hidden answered, telling the guy he had been waiting for 2 years for him to finally say those words from his own mouth about taking out that man, realizing at his final moments that it was his very own brother who planted this guy in his ranks, the very same person he had been looking down upon his entire life as nothing more than a useless fool. The man could only utter the words that his subordinates won't let this go and would make him and his brother pay for what they had done. And apparently, those were the very words that would end up bringing down his entire organization. Cut that very same morning, when the news of his brother's assassination hadn't reached Alan and he was peacefully waking up to start his day. And no, I was wrong. It's not morning, the dude slept most of the day since there was no one around to pester him to wake up early. Plus, since no one was around to nag him about eating healthy or any of that nonsense, he was stuffing his face with whatever he could get his hands on. A life of a true noble, something he could never even dream of in that prison of a home he was stuck in. Just then, as he was thinking nothing could go wrong to ruin this perfectly perfect day, he saw Evan running in with a letter in hand, and the moment his eyes fell on that piece of paper, his whole world came crashing down. Because yeah, it was an invite for the last son of the Palladio family to return to his mansion to attend his oldest brother's funeral. Jump back to the present, and the whole place was frozen stiff as our hero wondered what he did wrong in his past life to deserve this fate. Plus, his servants were shivering under his mere glare. So yeah, that was also pretty weird as well. But the most weirdest thing happened when he heard Evan whispering into his ear, asking when he became the Shadow Leader, which I presume is also a faction. Well anyway, after all those crazy circumstances which somehow dragged him into this mess, here he is, Alan, all curled up in a corner, and after somewhat getting a hold of his thoughts, he asked Evan why everyone was treating him like he was the villain of this story. Well, it was a no-brainer, since he is the only person who benefits the most from this situation, plus the timing of this incident was too convenient, since Leo was assassinated on the very day he left for a small rundown village. So yeah, that is pretty suspicious. Plus the whole Avalon organization that was backing Leo, and the only people who might come after him for revenge were also slaughtered on the very same night Leo was assassinated. So if you piece all those things together, he basically looks guilty as hell. And the only logical conclusion to this was that he was the shadow leader of the country who had orchestrated the assassination of his own brother and everyone working with him. By then, even our hero was starting to doubt himself, wondering if he really was the one behind everything. But still, he couldn't help but question who could be crazy enough to take down such a massive underworld organization in a single night. That's when he recalled something he heard not too long ago about a new faction that appeared in the city and was running around hunting other organizations. Evan asked if he was talking about Blue Moon, and our hero answered yes. Although it was a possibility, according to Evan, that wasn't the case this time, since those people always leave behind their mark and all the corpses of the deceased are never found after the attack, since all of them disappear without a trace. And since the members of Avalon were found dead with stab wounds on their bodies, yeah, he didn't need to repeat himself. It meant he was the shadow leader who ordered their execution. With that out of the way, our hero fell silent and began thinking through the whole situation with a clear head, since back in the game he never heard of any organization by the name of Blue Moon. Plus, not sure why he was thinking this, but he was thinking of them as a small organization of weakling vigilantes who couldn't possibly be behind bringing down a massive organization like Avalon, and he wondered just who could be behind everything. Cut back to the orphanage where the girls were busy reporting to Utia about their last night's attack on Avalon. According to Rinne, she made sure to weed out every last member so they shouldn't worry about anything from her end. Same thing with Seorang, she sniffed out every last one of them. Just then, their little puppet master arrived with new information, where he managed to pinpoint the locations of 486 remaining members of Avalon who went into hiding after the death of their leader, followed by another voice from the back calling out to Utia, and who else but Radan, who offered to cut all of them into pieces, something Utia had no objections to. On the contrary, she was looking forward to it. And that is how Avalon, a massive organization that dominated the Asteria Kingdom for years, was wiped out in just 5 days. Back in the present, Radan was reporting something important to Utia, and when the girl asked what it was, he showed her a list of nobles who were connected to Avalon, and one of those noble families by the name of Altia Dukedom had a particularly deep connection with Avalon. After reading through the list, Utia turned towards the four with their new orders, and of course not to leave behind even a single person connected to the people who tried to harm their master. Quickly composing herself, she turned to Rinne, asking about the Information Guild and if they happened to be snooping around their master lately, after the death of Leo, or perhaps they were looking into them. Krolin told the woman that those people were convinced it was someone else behind the death of all these people, and not the Blue Moon. Deus confirmed it, and asked if they should keep tabs on their movements as well. And the answer was a yes, and for some reason Utia seemed a bit scared, as she made it clear to the four that no matter what happens, they can never let that man know it was the Blue Moon behind this incident. Surprised, Deus reminded the woman it was his own family who tried murking him first, so why should they be afraid of anything or that man finding out it was them who saved his life? And the terrified girl reminded the four that this time they had acted without that man's orders, something they were never supposed to do. After all, they were nothing more than a sword belonging to him, and a sword must never think for itself. Terrified, she reminded the kids how terrifying that man's power was and how he knows everything and keeps an eye on their every move, which was why their Blue Moon must only move on his orders. And most importantly, they can never afford to disappoint that man, otherwise the consequences would be beyond anything they could handle. Deus, at this point, didn't even know what he was supposed to think anymore. After all, he knew firsthand the terrifying power hidden inside of Utia, but still that girl was acting so nervous simply because she was scared of being found out for making a decision on her own for the first time. After thinking it over for a bit, he assured the girl not to worry and leave everything to him, and he would make sure news of this never reaches that man. Cut to the so-called most terrifying individual in the world who was buried underneath a pile of paperwork that was dumped on his desk the very next day. His whole family fell apart. Wait, no, a whole month had passed by this point, and the kid didn't find a single moment of peace, since for some reason everyone had been pushing all the work on him. And during all this time, he had been trying to figure out who was behind the deaths of both his brothers, since both of them perished far earlier than they were supposed to. which shouldn't have been the case. Just then, he heard the door to his office open and saw some of his men walking in with yet another pile of paperwork. At this point, he could only curse his rotten luck, since when his father was still alive, these same people used to slack off and skip work all the time. But now they were all working like their lives depended on it, and he had no idea why. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because these people were terrified of the fool sitting in front of them, and were afraid that if he found out they weren't giving it their all, they might actually lose their heads, leaving the former corporate slave right back where he started, except this time with a bigger desk, more paperwork, and somehow even worse working hours. Cut to Evan, who was staring at something in a mix of astonishment and confusion, and it was our hero's magical control, which had grown insanely fast in the past 2 years, which was just absurd, since the level he was at usually took people at least 4 years to reach. Our boy agreed that his talent for learning magic was indeed very high, but that didn't change the fact that he was still weak as hell. Turns out the only reason he got this good at controlling his mana in such a short amount of time was because he worked tirelessly, but in the end, he realized all that hard work was kind of pointless, since his weak body wasn't able to store large amounts of mana. At first, he refused to give up and kept testing every kind of magic he could get his hands on to compensate for this weakness of his body, hoping something might work, and he couldn't lie. He did indeed feel pretty excited at the beginning about all the things he could do in this new world, but slowly, as time passed, he started to realize his mana hall, a place where mana gathers, was insanely tiny and couldn't be expanded, no matter how much effort he put in. A little explanation about mana halls and how they work. So basically, it could be considered like an athlete's natural weight class or limit, something they are born with. In some people, their genetics are blessed and they have an insane capacity and growth potential. But in other cases, like our hero, that limit is pathetically weak, like trying to fill a cracked cup that can barely hold anything in the first place. But still, after gathering all that knowledge he did find something that might help him fix this problem. But the chances of it succeeding were pretty slim. In the middle of his thinking, he saw Evan handing him a letter. And no, it wasn't from Utia, just some invitation to a party. The story cuts elsewhere, and the place was seen packed with people dressed all fancy, walking around trying to hide their insecurities by convincing themselves they were better than others, just because they could afford shiny things. But in reality, they are the most pathetic and unloved people around. That was when our hero walked into the room dressed to kill, looking all sharp and stuff. Yeah, no, the only thing he did was walk his way from his carriage to this hall, and he was feeling so exhausted that he looked like he was about to pass out. As for what this place is and why he was invited, this is a regular aristocratic ball which is held in the southern Asteria Kingdom, where nobles gather to scheme about how to make common folks' lives even worse. And since he was about to become a count soon, our hero decided to switch to his serious mode and build as many connections from this party as possible. After all, having allies is crucial for a peaceful future. But the problem was, just like his servants, all of these guys were also running in the opposite direction the moment they saw his gaze turn toward them. Even when he tried to approach them and start a conversation, the response he got was the same. Everyone running in terror, fearing for their own lives. As for Evan, the guy was having the time of his life watching him make that face after failing again and again. But refusing to give up, he told Evan to go and enjoy himself while he dealt with this mess. Turns out his family used to be extremely respectable back in his great-grandfather's era. But as the years went by, their reputation turned rotten because of people like his father and brothers. Plus, the fact that he was a bastard made it even harder for him to connect with any powerful people. So his plan was to show these people how gentlemanly he was, since he had been secretly practicing his social skills in his free time. With that in mind, he picked up a glass of wine to show off in front of the daughter of the man who organized this whole event. And damn man, what on earth had he been practicing? This dude was born with the face of a villain. God fucking, he was actually trying to smile here, but ended up looking like he was about to order an execution, as he told the woman he'd kill to have a few bottles of such fine wine at his own home. Yeah, the poor woman was so terrified that she actually froze for a whole minute trying to process what she just witnessed. And then in the very next moment, she took off running, completely misunderstanding the whole thing, thinking the guy was threatening her over the wine or something. So she rushed off to tell her father to prepare some crates for him immediately. Yeah, that completely backfired, since now even the rest of the guests were convinced this crook just blackmailed that poor woman into giving him limited edition regional wine. To make it even worse, even Evan walked in to laugh at his misery. Cut a couple of minutes and the kid was seen standing in a corner after successfully robbing every single guest that came to the party. The kid just unintentionally extorted all of them and ended up with all sorts of things. Luxury steeds, rare tea, metalwork, basically everything these people sell for millions. And now, after finally giving up, he realized what big dicks his father and brothers were for his family's reputation to be this ruined. And with the rumors going around that he was the one who eliminated those two guys, it definitely didn't help his case. With his social life successfully destroyed, he began walking away to get some fresh air, completely unaware that someone was watching his every move from a distance, and whoever this person is, she seemed genuinely interested in him. Cut to the balcony, and the kid was seen staring at the stars, still trying to figure out where it all went wrong, when he suddenly heard a female voice asking if she could have a moment of his time. Surprised that someone actually approached him, he turned to see who it was, only to find absolutely no one standing there. That was when he lowered his gaze to the ground and spotted a child standing right in front of him, the third daughter of Duke Altea, which was surprising since why would someone from such a prestigious family approach him? Plus, these people were one of the 3 major shadow players in the game, also known as the Northern Troublemakers, which also meant the girl in front of him was trouble, just like how his brothers were. But still, he couldn't recall coming across her in the game, which was also strange. In the middle of his thoughts, he heard the girl opening her mouth, and to his surprise, she asked for his help with something she was dealing with. When he asked what it was, she hesitated for a moment at first, and then our hero heard the girl claim that someone was planning on assassinating her very soon. Next chapter, and we are told that this girl is the same story as our hero. She is the daughter from a mistress, aka side bitch, her father used to mess around with behind his wife's back, and now the children from that main wife are trying to delete her to take control over the entire family. So yeah, our hero could somewhat relate to this little girl. Plus, the fact that he never saw her in the main game story meant she was already deleted before the main story began, which was why he somewhat considered helping out the poor child. I mean, just look at that innocent little thing who would be heartless enough not to help someone like that. Yeah, apparently that someone is our hero, since the dude didn't even try to sugarcoat it. He straight up told the girl no, he doesn't want to get involved in her family's politics. Desperate, the girl offered to hand him half of her family's fortune. The answer was still a no, and the reason was simple. Although he sympathizes with the girl, he could barely take care of himself, so he didn't want to give her false hope. After all those things people were saying about him were just rumors. He was no powerful figure controlling an organization consisting of monsters from the shadows, and was unknowingly cleaning the whole country of criminals. But then again, he may be a coward, but he is a coward with a heart, so he wished the girl good luck, assuring her everything would work out, hoping she would find someone who could help her with her situation. With that, he began walking back into the place, completely unaware that someone had been watching his every move and listening to that whole conversation. And that someone was Deus and Rene. And since Deus was preparing to head out and tell Raden not to lay a finger on that girl when he goes out to slaughter her entire family, Rene told him there was no need for that since that girl was never their target in the first place. Since she is the only person who has no connections with the underground forces that were working with the people that tried to take out their master, well, that made things easier for Deus, and since that was the case, they decided to stick with their main mission for now, which was to make sure to dispose of any evidence that may reach to the guy revealing that it was them who took out his brother and his subordinates, and also to make sure no one tries to harm him during this party. After a while, our hero, looking all shriveled up after being ignored by every noble in the room, was seen aimlessly walking around the place, and just as he had lost all hope, he heard a sweet voice of a woman calling out to him, and that brought tears to his eyes that someone actually approached him. But on the outside, he still had that weird expression plastered on his face as he turned to the person and found the same red-headed beauty standing before him, which he instantly recognized as one of the main characters from the main storyline. Because of course, why would a normal person try to approach a psychopathic murderer like him anyway? Although he knew this woman was trouble, he still decided to play along for now, and politely greeted the beautiful lady by the name of Zenonia, and that surprised the woman since she didn't expect him to know who she was. But to our hero, that wasn't surprising since in a couple of years, pretty much everyone is going to find out who she is. And no, not in a good way. So basically, this kingdom has 3 great families that pretty much run the whole show. The first one being the Altea of the North, from which that little girl belongs to. Second up, the Palladeo family that controls the whole of East, and finally, the Zenonia family that controls the West. And this woman before him is the eldest daughter of the Zenonia family by the name of Kalia. As for why our hero feared this woman, turns out Zenonia's family is less of a family and more like a massive crime syndicate that governs their lands with absolute authority, and this woman is the one controlling everything from the shadows and has eyes and ears everywhere. Basically, she is Griselda Blanco of this world, a kind of person no one wants to cross, which is why for the sake of his easy life, our hero decided not to get involved with this woman, and not sure how this was going to help him to achieve that, but he complimented the woman for her beauty. And then the one thing he feared the most happened as he heard the woman asking if he has a moment since she wanted to discuss something important with him. And from that expression, not sure if it was an invitation to her room or she just wanted to talk about something, but our boy wasn't planning on sticking around to find out. So he made an excuse, reminded the woman there were too many eyes on them right now, which in reality was just his way to try and shoo her away, since he didn't want any trouble following him. But to the girl, it meant something else entirely, and she was now 100% sure the rumors circulating about this man were really true. And since he had piqued her curiosity about him, she assured the kid this wasn't going to be their last meeting. After that, she quietly turned around and began walking away, leaving our clueless hero wondering what did she mean by that. As for the two that were keeping a watch on the kid, Deus noticed something to the side and called for Rene's attention. Turning around, the girl saw a figure standing outside the mansion, and for some reason that person was also keeping an eye on our hero, which clearly meant trouble, so she ordered Deus to keep a watch on that person, and as soon as he gets the chance, eliminate him. The story cuts to the next day, and both men are seen standing before a canyon that looked creepy as hell, which is why Evan was second-guessing whether they should even be entering that place. But our boy was so focused that he didn't even bother listening to the man's concerns, since he had been looking for this place for so long. Turns out, this place is the main reason he came all the way to the south under the pretext of attending that party. His real goal was to find this labyrinth from the start. As for this place, it's called the Labyrinth of Whispers, where players are given 8 riddles which they must solve to advance. And if they successfully manage to clear all of them, they can receive a powerful artifact as a reward. And since he had put countless hours grinding in this game, our hero was confident in his abilities to solo this entire place. Still, even he had to admit, seeing that massive door right before his eyes, he was feeling a bit nervous, even though he had run this dungeon countless times. As he was lost in his thoughts at the sight, Evan asked the kid how he knew this place existed, and the kid suddenly murmured he's been to this place many times. That obviously surprised the man, since all he ever does is waste his days inside his home and never leaves like some creepy shut-in. So when did he even come here? Our boy also realized he might have said too much, so he quickly covered it up, and forcing that smile, told the guy he has his ways and suggested they stop wasting time and head inside. Cut to the inside, and man, it was a cool sight. Some gargoyle-looking creatures were seen flying all around the cave with a massive hand that was squishing anything that came anywhere near the ground. Because right down there is our hero trying to figure out his first riddle, and if he got it wrong, those hands would stop, and all those monsters would start dive-bombing the hell out of them. Evan, on the other hand, was staring at the kid with a questioning look, wondering how this kid could stay so calm in a situation like this. Plus, even after working for 4 years with this guy, he still couldn't understand him at all. Because everything he did during this time was random, like eliminating crime groups, saving orphans, and all sorts of weird stuff, and all this time he barely left the estate, yet he always acts like he knows everything about this world, and even what was about to happen. But despite him being weird as hell and making decisions that sound stupid at the time, the main reason he never left this guy's side is because everything he does somehow leads to a good outcome. But this time, he got dragged into something on a whole different level, since he was sure this kid was going to get them killed. Meanwhile, our boy was just trying to keep what he ate that morning from spilling out of his mouth, since all those creatures being squished like mosquitoes was too much for his stomach to handle, and he was trying his hardest not to throw up. But luckily, the bloodbath was finally over, and the door leading to the main room finally opened up, and man, inside was a whole-ass room filled to the brim with gold and all sorts of treasures. And in the middle was a hand with some rings resting on its fingers, and our hero's target was that black one, which according to Evan seemed like the most worthless of them all. If only he knew how wrong he was. But instead of explaining anything to the guy, our hero told him to drop whatever he was planning to take from this place, since it would only bring them trouble. As for this item, this one here is the Oath of Restraint, and that's pretty much all that's shown about this item so far. Walking out of the room, he suddenly heard Evan's scared voice asking if this was also part of the whole trial. Oh boy, these things look just like statues of the rulers from Solo Leveling. Seems like our boy is about to receive his very own system. Evan, on the other hand, wasn't taking any chances, so he brought out his sword, which looked more like a toothpick, in front of those things to try and buy our hero some time to escape. But to his shock, that cowardly good-for-nothing kid he knew of suddenly told the man to stay out of this since he was going to handle this himself. And just like that, both men found themselves surrounded from all sides with no way left to escape, as those giant statues slowly blocked off all their paths. And with that, it happened. The things began charging in from all sides, with Evan's terrified screams telling the kid to run since his second-tier magic wasn't going to be enough to stop these monsters. But our hero casually lifted his hand and uttered the words, "I invoke the Oath of Restraint." And just like that, everything froze as if time itself had stopped, followed by a voice echoing through the entire place calling him a fragment who inherited the strong will of Naikula. And our hero found himself in a completely different place, as the voice gave him 2 wishes in exchange for 2 restrictions he needed to put on his body. Turns out this wasn't the same as the game, because back then the players were given 2 windows to choose from, but this time he was able to hear a voice plus a gigantic face of a woman was seen hovering in the sky, something called the Oath of Restraint, and this ring is an absorption-type artifact that, as its name implies, allows the user to impose restrictions on themselves in exchange for power. As for our trembling hero, he took a deep breath and got ready to make his first wish. And when the entity asked what was he offering in return for his first wish, he told the entity he would only use the signs of Babylonia when casting magic. The thing accepted the condition and asked what he wanted in return, and our hero asked for the power to twist the laws of the world a little further, which damn sounds way too overpowered. But for the thing, it was no big deal, so it granted his first wish. Then came the turn for his second wish, and when the creature asked for another restriction in exchange, he declared that he would strictly chant the words of Babylonia when casting spells. The thing accepted once again and asked what he wanted in return, and this time the fool took it even further, as he asked for the power to defy the world's laws. And this time the entity actually fell silent for a moment, which also scared the kid a little, because clearly he was asking for too much. Still, he didn't back down. After all, the things he asked for were the same two options he chose in the game every time he got his hands on this item. But still, this time it wasn't a game, meaning there was a really real possibility that thing might actually turn him into dust. But to his surprise, the creature agreed to grant that wish as well. As it slowly began to fade away, it left behind a few final words, thanking him for inheriting the will. But our hero had no clue what this will was, since this was his first time hearing about it. Before he could dwell on that thought, he noticed the ring on his finger beginning to get absorbed into his hand, which was a sign that both restrictions had been applied successfully. Following that, time slowly began flowing back to normal, as he heard the creature's voice inside his mind telling him it would forever be watching him. And once again, it referred to him as the one who inherited the will. Back in the present, the time finally resumed, and all those golems began running in to squish both men under their feet. And our hero activated a skill from the game, which back then looked like a massive sphere of lightning, but now looked pitiful, even though he was pouring all of his mana into it. And it was a bummer, since no matter how hard he trained, this was his natural limit. But don't think he was done, and this whole trip was a waste, because guess what? He still hadn't used his ring's restrictions to amplify his power. But just to be on the safe side, he began using sigils to strengthen his spell even further, with the first one being Refraction. Then came the second sigil called Rebound. And finally, the third and last sigil called Blue Light. And with that, the massive Rasengan was ready to be thrown at the incoming golems. But before that, he needed to use some hand signs of Babylonia, which he did. And with that, all the preparations were done. So he released the massive spell toward the incoming enemies, resulting in a powerful electric blast shooting out of the palm of his hand. And to Evan's absolute amazement, he witnessed all those golems getting engulfed in that electricity. And just like that, in mere seconds, the whole labyrinth fell silent once more. But that silence didn't last long, since almost immediately, that electricity began shooting out of those creatures' bodies, shattering them from the inside out. And then complete silence, as all that remained of those massive monsters in the room were the shattered cores, the stones that were powering their bodies. As for Evan, yeah, that expression is justified. After a bit, the two were seen making their way out of the labyrinth, with Evan pestering him for answers. And if he had been hiding his true power all along, but the answer was no, since hiding his power for so long around someone like him was impossible. But that still didn't explain what he had just witnessed back there, since in all his 15 years as a mercenary, he had never seen anything like it. So he asked if that really was the power of a second-tier spell, to which our hero simply answered, yes. But on the inside, even the poor guy had no clue what just happened, since the spell he pulled back then wasn't supposed to be that powerful. Plus, back in the game, when a player used sigils to enhance their spell, one sigil could only be used at one turn. But this time, for some reason, he was able to add multiple sigils to make the spell stronger, and ended up using 3 different kinds of sigils on just one spell. Each one multiplied its power, turning the stacked Thunderblade into a large-scale lightning attack. So basically, to put in simple words, when he accepted the restriction to cast spells, he gave up flexibility in his casting. But in return, he gained a new power that lets him stack enhancements to massively boost his magic output. Damn, that part was hard to explain, and hopefully it came out clear. Anyway, even our hero knew what he did back there was just overkill, and he was just glad the spell didn't backfire or anything and accidentally injured Evan. Cut to a few moments later, and Evan was done. He just wanted to lie down and sleep, because dealing with this kid was proving to be even harder than finding those orphan kids. Plus, he wanted to know who the psycho was who designed that dreadful place. Our hero didn't know how to properly answer that question, but he did know a thing or two about this place, which he learned through the community. Back then, some people were calling this place the Palin Labyrinth, which eventually caught on, and people started calling it by that name. So using that to make something up, he told Evan that this place was created by someone named Palan, but the guy was so tired that he didn't even bother listening to the explanation, so our hero just lifted him back to his feet since he needed to head back to the east to deal with some important business. After a bit, they arrived at the spot where their horses were waiting for them. But unbeknownst to them, someone had been watching the whole thing from the start, and this someone was our green head, who seemed really interested in the kid, after seeing with her own eyes what he was capable of. And for some reason, she began leaping her way back towards the labyrinth. Arriving at the place, she quietly walked in and found herself standing before the same massive door with those writings on it, which she recognized as the script of the Alanef Empire. And this is a very important part of the story because this place has a very deep connection with Rene. After looking around for a bit, she began reading through the inscriptions on the walls, which translated to something like, "He repelled the invasion of the Black One and defeated Alakolaka, the devourer of his subjects' hearts." Turns out, the girl knew the whole story behind the labyrinth, who made it, and the kingdom it was part of, because she was born within the ancient library, which held countless pieces of knowledge, even records related to this place. And because of that, she knew for a fact that what that man said at the time was true, because this place was indeed made by someone named Palo. And no, he wasn't the only one she was curious about now, since even Utia, or otherwise recorded in those books as the Bloodiya Queen, also bugged her for a while, since she never acted like how she was described in those books. since even someone like her always acted scared of this person, and now hearing those things coming from that man's mouth and how he even knew the great Pelon, she was certain she knew exactly why that was the case. Moreover, the incantations he whispered to cast that spell don't even exist in the records of the ancient library, and that got her wondering just who that man was and what kind of forbidden secrets he was hiding. After piecing together what she could, she began making her way out of the labyrinth. Well, what do you know, the girl was now fully committed to serving that man as her master, since before today she was merely following orders, unsure if that man truly was extraordinary, but now, after seeing the proof with her own eyes, she had no doubts left in her heart. Just then she sensed a familiar presence near her, so she turned, asking the person if they managed to find anything. On top of one of the trees was Deos, and the kid told the girl he failed in his mission. Turns out, as soon as the guy realized he had been spotted, something happened, and his head twisted on its own, so he wasn't able to extract any information they needed from that guy. That was troubling indeed. So the girl suggested they head back, since she needed to report this incident to everyone for proper handling. The story cuts to the Zenonia Count's house, where Redhead was seen enjoying a cup of tea. Apparently she hadn't been able to get our boy out of her mind ever since their meeting. The main reason being that cold gaze he carried, which to her felt like staring into the depths of the abyss. Plus, what he said at that moment, that she was famous, made no sense. She did agree that Count Zenonia was both powerful and renowned, but for him to specifically say that she was well-known was bugging her, since she rarely socializes with anyone, which made no sense. Why would he say those words to her? Getting up, she called out to her father, asking if he finds this whole situation strange as well. And then she did something as she snapped her fingers, and something began happening to the man, and then out of nowhere he slumped onto the table like a lifeless puppet. Well, turns out not lifeless, but he is indeed a puppet, because this woman is the real one running the family, and that man she called father in front of everyone was nothing but her pawn, which she uses to keep her true identity hidden. But the strange part was, no one knew about this secret, so how did that man find out about it? Plus, at that time, he even detected the spy she had planted on him, which was also somewhat concerning. And keep in mind, all this is just in her delusional little head. That poor guy had no idea about any of that stuff, especially that he was being tailed by her spy. Just then, as she walked out of the room, she spotted one of her guards running at her in panic for some reason. Annoyed, she asked what was going on and why he was causing such a commotion at this hour, and the man told the woman they found something in her room. Cut to the place, and the woman spotted the body of that same shadow she planted on the kid lying motionless inside of her own room. According to the guy behind her, the seal that was placed on that man was still intact, which means he didn't reveal their secrets to whoever got to him, but to the girl. That was even more concerning. But at the same time, she felt amused, since how did that man know the person tailing him was one of her men without even interrogating the guy? And that made her even more curious about the man, since somehow that guy managed to catch her off guard and figure out all her secrets with just one meeting. Next chapter, and we are at the Altia Dakal territory, where a carriage was seen entering the palace grounds, and inside was Loria, who was also thinking about our boy and how, just as her father and other nobles, that man's eyes were cold. Although normally she would keep her distance from a person like that, she was desperate and was frustrated that he refused to help her. Turns out the girl had been going through a lot. Her 4 older siblings had stripped her of all her wealth and power, and now she had absolutely nothing left and was nothing more than a figurehead with their family's name. So far, she barely managed to survive by clinging to her father's mercy and affection, but now she can't even do that because of how things had been going lately. With all those things running through her head, she entered the manor and was immediately greeted by screams of some maids who were relieved to see her. Surprised, the girl asked what was all this commotion about, and heard the 2 women telling the girl that 2 of her siblings had committed suicide a couple minutes ago. And that was news the girl wasn't expecting to hear the moment she arrived back at the house. Plus, she refused to believe that people who would stoop so low as to stab their own family members in the back for power would take their own lives. But there was no time to dwell on it, so she asked about the other 2 and where they were. On her command, the servants immediately ran to check up on them as well, and were left horrified at the sight because those 2 had also taken each other's lives. Story cuts to the orphanage, where Utia was seen welcoming all her subordinates for another meeting. And the reason was that this time all of them received letters from their masters. And yep, all of them were extremely happy about this, since this was the first time their master wrote anything to them personally. Okay, we are going to have some weird time skips here, so bear with it. And now we are back with the girl who was staring at the scene in horror. And right outside her mansion was the real culprit, Ninja, jumping his way out of the place. And yep, Rodden, who was pretty proud of his handiwork, since no one even saw him entering or exiting the place. Back in the mansion, all the servants were seen running out of the place in horror, since they feared they might get caught up in this mess. But our girl was lost in her own world because she had a pretty good idea about what was going on, as she recalled that man's final words as he turned around to leave, and she realized what he really meant at that moment, which also confirmed those rumors circulating around that man. He truly is a monster who hides his claws, waiting to strike when the time is right, the true shadow behind the death of his own brothers and the families who were backing them. And that terrified the child to her core, because in just one night, after one brief exchange of words with that man, she became the sole heir of the Altia Duchy. And no, this was not a good thing, because this girl unknowingly made a deal with a demon, and she knew there was no turning back after this. After all, she knew exactly what happens to the people who betray him, since there are already countless examples of that, which is why she steeled herself and decided to move forward on the path she chose. Cut 2 months to our hero's home, where one day he suddenly received a parcel from the Duke of Altia, something he wasn't expecting. So he opened the box to check what it was and found a bottle of wine along with a note. And this is no ordinary wine. This thing costs several thousand. Yeah, that's right, 1,000 gold coins for a bottle of wine. That's just absurd. Checking the note, he found the youngest daughter of that family's name on it, which was also surprising, since why would she send him such an expensive gift after he turned her down back in that party? So to double check, he asked the man if this thing truly was meant for him, and heard these specific words from his mouth. Yes, the Duke personally prepared that gift for him. And that Duke part made our hero pause, because that would mean that girl somehow became the Duke of Altia. Cut back to Loria, who was busy handling her ducal duties or whatever it is they do. Turns out, in these past 2 months, a lot happened. After the death of her siblings, her father also passed away due to his illness, so a succession ceremony was held shortly after, and she became the Duke. But still, it all felt unreal to her, because 2 months ago, she wasn't even allowed to step foot inside that office, and now she was running the whole thing. Also, as luck would have it, she wasn't questioned at all about what happened to her siblings, and no one suspected her of having a hand in any of it, all thanks to the party she attended. Plus, at that time, even her secret organization working under her had already been wiped out by her siblings, who were planning to take her out on that very same night of the incident, which also helped her case. Apparently, according to her delusional head, this was all meticulously planned by that man. He knew of her situation and what her family was going through, so he waited for her to approach him, and as soon as he found the perfect opportunity, he handled everything, leaving only her to be the successor of the family, which would only mean one thing. Whatever that man had planned for this kingdom, it involved Altia as well. But the question was what? Because even after she unified all the organizations under Altia, it still didn't come close to the power that man holds, which meant he wanted something else from her. And the only thing she could think of was that man was planning on expanding his influence and growing his family's business across the kingdom. But he couldn't do that with his current family's reputation and the rumors circulating around him. That's where Altia comes in. One of the most respected and influential families in the whole kingdom. He wants to use that name, the one that manipulates the political world from the shadows, to get everything he wants. Staring at the picture of her deceased father, the girl told herself she needed to focus on the future from now on, because she was certain her noble benefactor was going to contact her soon with her orders. Okay, I didn't get this part, but I think she was thinking he wanted the hand of the family's head in marriage or something, and she was feeling pretty happy about it. After all, she found a man capable enough, someone who could take care of her, which is why she was hoping he would like the gift she sent to him. Back with our hero, who was sending off the messenger, and after he was gone, the kid was seen frozen in place, unsure of what to think, since it happened again. Just like her brothers, the game went completely off track, and the people who weren't supposed to perish were gone, with a completely different character sitting on the seat of the Duke. We jump again in time, and now there are only 5 years left before the true story begins, where the sins appear to destroy the world. And while wandering around the massive mansion, our hero spotted Evan running in with some urgent news. And when asked what it was, he handed our hero a letter from Utia. Taking the thing, both of them began walking into the office, with our boy asking if they managed to find out anything about the one who assassinated his brother. And the answer was no, but he did assure the kid the Information Guild was actively investigating the matter. He himself was curious about him showing so much interest in this matter, and asked if he was planning on taking revenge on whoever it was. Our hero simply told the man he wanted to be prepared, just in case someone tries to target him as well, which Evan found somewhat amusing, since the kid was starting to act all serious and count-like. Ignoring him, he turned towards the letter instead and read that the kids were doing great, with Deus practically a professional now in puppetry. Sail Rong was also adjusting in well and had already made many friends. Rinny still enjoyed reading books, and because of that, she had even started to make new things, which was pretty impressive. As for Radon, he was into gardening and was doing quite well. Reading through the thing lifted our hero's mood, and even though he had never seen their faces, the fact that these kids grew up so well while he was sponsoring them made him smile like a proud father. Turning to Evan, he asked for their ages, which somewhat surprised the man since he never showed this much interest in those 5, but he still told the kid they were around the age that they were ready to step out into the society. Or in simple words, they won't need to be sponsored anymore. They can leave and find their own way in life. Yeah, that was somewhat heartbreaking for our hero, since he had raised those kids since they were little, and he could already imagine seeing all of them thanking him for raising them and getting ready to head out to find their own stories. And in the end, he thought it was a good idea to let them go as well, which surprised Evan, since he went through so much trouble to find those 5 kids, and now he was just planning to just let them go. Our hero told the guy that those 5 grew up well, so it was now time to think about their future. Plus, he was sure that after all this time, the chances of them awakening as sins were practically zero, so it would be better they went on to live normal lives and built families of their own instead of rotting away in that orphanage. Evan also agreed to that. Recalling their traits from the game, he remembered how Utia was talented in faith. Deos's talents lay in swordsmanship. Rina was excellent in research because of her love for books. Solrong was an exceptional combat specialist. And finally, Red-On, who excelled in leadership. So his plan was to place all of them in the right positions so each of them could shine in their own way. And I presume this is before those kids received all their letters, and he was also planning on giving each one of them special gifts of some kind. Fast forward to the evening, and the kid was finally done with all the letters and whatever else he had planned to gift them. And since that was the case, Evan got up to deliver all those letters to the children with our boy waving him goodbye. Well, that's all for today, folks. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, and if you want to know what happens next, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, take care.